So today's topic is called mindfulness, the art of self-remembering. And this is a topic that we started a bit last week when we were talking about the different states of consciousness that we usually experience. And so the first two states of consciousness, we said that the first state is in the state in which we're completely asleep or dreaming. And then the second state is referred to as the waking state, in which we're physically awake, we're perceiving the world, but in that state we're not necessarily conscious. Okay, and so we try to make a difference in the concept of what being conscious is, or simply like physically awakened. Okay, and so we explored a little bit of that last week, and then we said that there is the third state of consciousness, which is referred to as the state of being awake, okay, which is more than just being intellectually awake. It's more than just being physically awake. It is a particular state of being, okay, in which, Jeanne Chapman says, self-remembering, self-remembering is another word that we use, which I actually like a little better than mindfulness, but mindfulness is it's like the more like what's the word, stream concept, mainstream concept, okay, and it's an art like anything, right? It takes a particular discipline and some practices, okay, in order for one to be able to become mindful or to be present, okay? And Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about this. So being conscious or self-remembering or mindfulness, as Jeanne Chapman says, is an attempt within a specific moment to be more conscious, more aware, and more present. Okay, that's like one of the most straightforward definitions that I've found when it comes to explaining what being present, being mindful is. But being the actual state of being is kind of like talking about the Tao. You know, and Lao said, that which can be explained is not the Tao. So it's a very personal experience. To be actually awake, to be consciously awake, or to be in that third state of consciousness is a very personal and intimate experience. Okay, and so we can talk about certain qualities or aspects that are present in one who's awake in general, but the only real way, or the only one that can tell if he or she is awake in a particular moment is the person itself. Okay, and so we like to talk about the different states of consciousness to kind of give us a ballpark idea of what being awake is and what being asleep is. Okay, so most of us have this concept of being awake as being intellectually aware of your environment and being physically awake. So spiritually speaking, that is not considered to be awake. Okay, so spiritually speaking, when one is awake, one has its consciousness awakened. You're perceiving life from a different state of being that actually allows you to have a broader perspective of the reality of the moment. Okay, and I say that because spirituality is really about helping us, or the role of spirituality is to help us perceive the reality as it is, not the reality that we have been conditioned to perceive. Okay, so we're just talking here about mysteries of life and death and life beyond death and all that. And so certainly that is a reality of life, but not many of us are able to actually experience that or even hear about it until we encounter it, because it's not something that is taken seriously in our culture, because it takes either an external circumstance or an internal attitude or internal preparation in order to perceive that aspect. Okay, and so it's not something that you can just experience just by walking around in your what we call the second state of consciousness. Okay, so Edgar Tolle talks a lot about what being present is, but in essence, what I found, and I like to, this is the way that I actually perceive or sense what self-remembering is. So, to me, the way that it feels is that when we are in a state of self-remembering, in a state of mindfulness, we sense, feel, and perceive ourselves within this body and within the environment. Okay? So let's take a moment to feel what that means, because that's what this is about. It's about experiencing or trying to get an idea, trying to have an experience of what this is. Okay? We know that, or as we've talked about before, we have a physical body. This physical body gives us sensations. Okay, you can sense things with your physical body. Okay, and you can also feel the world. You can feel emotions. Okay, that's another aspect of yourself. So you have a physical body that gives you sensations. You have emotions that allow you to feel, and you have a mind that allows you to perceive. Okay, the mind gives you a perspective of something. Okay, I would actually say that the mind and the emotions, what we call the psyche, gives you a perception of something depending on the concepts that you have about what life is. That is going to either allow you or not allow you to perceive something. Okay, so if you have this concept that something cannot be true or is not real, then it's going to be very hard for you to experience that, to perceive it, right? Because you're like shutting yourself to that. I think the answer is making my my throat back today. So very simple example of this is I think I talked about a study that they did about like how mindful, how conscious people are on a day-to-day basis, and so they did this very simple experiment in which someone pretending to be a tourist stops someone on the street, and then they ask the person, "Oh, I'm lost. Can you help me with this direction? Try to find this place." So the person takes the paper, tries to figure out. While this is happening, someone passes in between them with like a big board. Okay, and so when this big board passes, there was another person behind that big board, and so when this happens, the person that originally was there is switched. Okay, and the study, they found that most people were not even aware of the fact that it was a different person that was standing in front of them.
I saw that.
Right? You did see it? Okay. And so, there are many examples of this that kind of to test people's awareness of the environment, right? And so, in that moment, this person is completely convinced that the person that's there is the same person, because in his mind, he doesn't see the possibility that it could be another person, right? So the reality of the moment for that person is not reality, right? They are projecting the reality of the moment. So they have a different perception of what the moment is. And it isn't until the person actually stops for a moment and observes with more awareness that person actually becomes conscious of that, right?
I think usually when they did that kind of like whatever trick or joke or whatever you want to call it, when they changed it from like a man to a woman, they usually would be like, well, hold on a second. But it was like they just put glasses on the guy or took off. They would never notice.
Right.
They wouldn't pick up. When it was a big difference, they kind of.
Right. When it's a big
sometimes
difference.
they didn't even notice when it changed from a man to a woman.
Right.
It's very funny to watch it.
There's actually a very cool video on YouTube that you can do, but I'm gonna kind of spoil it for you guys. But it's I forgot what the name is, but it's basically like they give you a task, right? They say, okay, so in the next scene, we're gonna show some kids playing with a basketball, and you have to count how many passes they throw. And so you start to focus and you start counting the passes, blah, 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 and then they cut, and then they ask you, did you see the gorilla? And then most people, they didn't actually see a gorilla. Then they play the scene again, and while they're doing the passes, there's a guy with a gorilla suit and like does this and then keeps walking. And like I don't know what the percentage is, but the study says that most people don't actually see the gorilla because they were so focused on what what was important for them in the moment that they were blinded to the rest of reality, right? And so this is what we're talking about when we say that just because you're physically awake, it doesn't mean that you are awake, that you're aware, that you're conscious, right? It takes a particular type of effort, or it takes what we call a conscious shock, or it takes a shock for you to become aware of your surroundings, aware of your reality, your inner and your external reality, okay? And so, so based on that, now that we kind of understand what we're talking about here, right? So we always have, first of all, it starts with this perception, or this idea that we're never really fully conscious, and that maybe there is way much more to reality than we can that we are experiencing in the moment, okay? Both externally and internally. And so the art of self-remembering or mindfulness starts with this perception, right? That there might be so much more to life than what we can currently perceive, okay? And so when we begin to apply this attitude, and when we begin to practice mindfulness, then we can actually open ourselves to begin to experience more of reality, okay? And so, so in relation to that, Samuel Veur says, explaining more of what self-remembering is, he says, inner self-remembering is something more than analyzing oneself. Last week we talked about self-observation. We said that it is something that will take us into awakening, into that third state of consciousness, to be awake. But usually when people talk about mindfulness, sometimes they confuse it with just like observing your thoughts, which we talked about last week. Just observe your thoughts, how you feel, and physically, emotionally. It's even more than that. It's even more than just seeing your thoughts and thinking about why you're thinking this way, etc. Right? So he says it is a new state which can only be known through direct experience. Self-observation, or which leads to intimate self-remembering, initiates the unfolding of the spatial sense, which reaches full maturity with the awakening of the consciousness. Okay? So there's an important concept here that's called the spatial sense, okay, which is really the basically your spatial sense is your ability to sense your space, right, or to be aware of your space. And so as you begin to practice self-observation and self-remembering or mindfulness, you'll begin to notice that your spatial sense begins to expand. And now you can begin to perceive more about life and what's here and even what's beyond your immediate environment. Okay, so this is the kind of the esoteric aspect of mindfulness. Okay, that you begin to perceive not only what is here physically, but even matter or beings that are vibrating at a higher state and that we're usually able to or available to see with our physical senses. Okay, and so then you can begin to talk about the soul. You can begin to talk about people's auras. You can begin to talk about the mysteries of life and death, etc. Right? Yeah.
I just want to mention that I never actually knew there was a term for it because I've noticed that through time, as I become more like aware, I have noticed that like, for example, I'm walking up the block and I'm in a state where it's like no thoughts, it's just being. Like the trees moving from like the wind is making the leaves move and everything, and I sort of feel that, and like it's hard to explain because it, like the area in between, it's like I feel that in between part, and also when you walk into rooms, depending on whether you are aware at that present moment, you can also have a subtle tell of like people's like emotions or whatever, and you get like a sort of just like an instant feeling that goes away really quickly on like how they're feeling at the moment. It's just interesting that there's like a word for that.
Right. Cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I've experienced the same things as far as like feeling yourself. Usually we feel ourselves as separate from everything, right? And you touch the board, and now you can feel the board. But as you separate your hand from it, you can no longer feel it. And when you begin to expand your spatial sense, you can begin to actually still sense that really there is no different. Really, the board and this empty space right here is really the same thing. It's just life. They're molecules. They're just vibrating at a different rate. They're more concentrated here than here, but it's all the same. It's all life, right? And so I like to say that when we begin to practice mindfulness, we begin to become more sensitive, more sensible, right? We're like desensitizing ourselves is the right word, but the opposite of that, basically. You're kind of tuning in more, right? You're becoming more sensitive, and that allows you to begin to now feel, to physically feel and even perceive states of matter that are more subtle in nature, right? That are vibrating at higher rates. This is why I love what Nikola Tesla said. If you want to understand the mysteries of the universe, think in terms of time, frequency, and vibration. So that's what it really is all about. It is the difference between this space right here and this board is just frequency and vibration of matter. It's just a different state, but it's in essence the same thing. It's just kind of like more concentrated here, right? So anyway, as we begin to practice this, your spatial sense begins to expand. Okay, you begin to feel, to sense more, to even see more, and that allows the consciousness to awaken. That allows you to have, to be as a spirit, as a consciousness, as a soul. Okay, which allows you now to begin to have a different perspective of life, right? And so this is why self-remembering is so important, because this is the first step in the process of spiritual awakening. Everyone has to go through here. A lot of people, there are many things into spirituality, into esotericism. There's like the ritualistic part, right? There's the psychological part, which this goes in tune with that, which is self-transformation and all of that, and working with the ego, eliminating the ego. But it all comes down to this. It all comes down to your ability in a moment to stop and observe, to stop and become receptive. Okay, and so this is something that requires a lot of training. This is why we're always being invited to be present, to be mindful, to be in the now, right? So, all right. So let me move on. So the way that I like to see it, self-remembering or mindfulness, is to sense, feel, perceive ourselves within the body and within the environment. Okay, this is what the meditation practice will be based on this. Okay, and so Master Samael continues to explain, during inner self-remembering and that tremendous super effort to be conscious of your own I, it is clear that one's attention is divided. Okay, we talked about this last week, this concept of the division of the attention. So he says one part of the attention is directed towards the effort and the other towards the ego. Okay? And so this concept that we have to divide our attention. And this is where kind of self-observation comes into place. Because in order for you to perceive something, you first have to put yourself in a receptive state. Right? It's like when you're having a conversation with someone. If you're not receptive, you're not going to understand what they're saying. You're not going to be able to communicate and to connect with that person. When you're having an argument, usually we want to prove our point, so we're not receptive, we're not listening, right? And so if you want to perceive something new, you have to begin to try to enter into that, put yourself in that listening mode, okay? Not just physically listening, but to be just receptive, physically, emotionally, and intellectually, and consciously, right? And so when one tries to do that, there is division of attention between, like Master Mao says, one part of the attention is directed towards the effort of trying to be awake. The effort of, okay, I'm going to try to feel myself within my body, within my body and within the environment, okay? And at the same time, to feel, bring your attention to the ego or your psychological state, okay? To feel yourself as the consciousness that is behind the thought. Okay? Usually the ego is related with the thought. Usually the ego is what sense mechanical thoughts, okay? And it's not that thinking is a bad thing, but it is about thinking in a conscious way as opposed to the mind that is thinking, right? So like, what's the difference when you're here now listening to me and you're paying attention, you're receptive, and let's say you need to plan your way back home. You're not going to do it now because you can't be fully receptive to what I'm telling you and be present as you plan your route back home. So then if your mind starts to plan your route back home, then your mind is kind of instinctively thinking, right? Where you are not really, and so then a battle happens where you're like, no wait, I want to listen, I want to focus, and your mind is over here running, right? Happens to us when we sit down to meditate. And so consciously thinking is to say, okay, wait a minute, let me stop everything and just focus on, here I am, and this is what I'm going to do. I'll leave the house, I'll go here, I'll take the train, boom. And so there is a major difference in awareness as you do both. You see? There's a major difference in your mind projecting thoughts and you actually creating thought, right? This is why I love that explanation from Eckhart Tolle that I put in the board last week, where he says that thought cannot exist without consciousness, but thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. But thought does need consciousness to be, right? And so as long as we feel ourselves and identify ourselves or bring awareness, because really we are the soul that becomes conscious or unconscious, okay? And so as we bring that consciousness, then we'll begin to enter into this state of being, into the state of being mindful and self-remembering, okay? Some of the states of being that are, or qualities that are present when we are present, when we are in this state of self-remembering, is two main aspects, I feel: relaxation and receptiveness, okay? So usually your body becomes relaxed when you're practicing mindfulness, when you're practicing self-remembering. And just on this alone, this is why this practice of mindfulness has so many great physical benefits and even mental benefits. Okay, they're linking now mindfulness and meditation to cure a lot of psychological states. They even say now that mindfulness and meditation can help one avoid Alzheimer's disease when they get older. And also it has helped some patients with the treatment of what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, especially with veterans that came back from war, they actually put them in a treatment in which they were, practicing meditation and mindfulness, and they saw that their symptoms decreased while they were on this practice, as opposed to another group of patients that weren't on it. They were just treated with regular, medication and whatnot. Okay. And so, there are many benefits of that, and your immune system goes up. And we talked a little bit about this one. We talked about the science of meditation, that people that meditate and that practice mindfulness tend to not only be happy and feel just more content overall, but their immune system is stronger. They have less stress. They have less. They get sick less, and all of these benefits. You can just Google benefits of meditation. It's all over the place now. You Google it. Really, so much research being done on that. Okay, and then the other aspect, as far as being not just physically relaxed, but emotionally and mentally, right? You become more receptive. Okay, you feel more receptive, which gives you the ability to even have a higher cognitive capacity. Okay, but before I get into that, so just to summarize, when we're in this state of being in this relaxed and receptive state, then we are in that state that I called in that listening mode, right? You're listening, or what Eckhart Tolle refers to as the now. You're in the now. You're in the present moment. Okay. So mindfulness and meditation, which really, meditation, again, the state of meditating is the result of mindfulness, is the result of self-remembering. So when you sit down to meditate, before you enter into meditation, the first thing that you do is you bring awareness to self, right? And that is what self-remembering is. That is what mindfulness is. And then from there, you enter into the state of meditation. And so, they realize this, and so now they're starting to focus more on mindfulness, or pinpointing really what comes from what. And so they've noticed that people that meditate and people that practice mindfulness, during those states, when they're mindful and when they're in those deep states of meditations, they have a higher cognitive capacity. Their brains, their minds are actually more receptive. Your brain is actually able to take more information than you usually are able to on your regular state of we can say that second state of consciousness. Okay? This is, like I said before, because your senses and perceptions expand. And so physically, they have realized that they've found that during meditation and when we're practicing mindfulness, certain monks that they were doing tests on, they noticed an increase in the gray matter in the brain. Okay, and I never remember exactly what gray matter is, so I always have my little note over here. I just know that it's this part of the brain that has to do with sensory perception. So gray matter contains most of the brain's neuronal cell bodies. Okay, so gray matter includes regions of the brain involved in muscle control and sensory perception, such as seeing and hearing, memory, emotion, speech, decision-making, and self-control. So the more mindful that you are, the better that you are at making decisions and having self-control. And more importantly also, it increases sensory perception, right? So your senses actually begin to expand and actually see more or perceive more, right? So it's very interesting. Okay, and so those are some of the aspects, right? We tend to be relaxed and we tend to be more aware, more receptive to things, right? This is why also a positive result of mindfulness and of meditation is that they say that people not only become smarter, but they also become their IQ levels rise and their EI levels also rise. Something that they call EI, emotional intelligence, which is your ability to perceive other people's emotions, your ability to work with emotions, okay, to transform emotions, and that allows you to relate and to connect with other people, right? If you're not too emotionally intelligent, that means that you are one of those people that becomes overwhelmed with emotions. Like an emotion of anger, right, can make you do something really crazy. Okay? And so anyone that people that are in jail for the most part are people that didn't know how to control their emotions, right? They weren't emotionally intelligent. And so that's why, it's a negative consequence of that. But people that begin to practice mindfulness and meditation tend to have a higher level of emotional intelligence, and they're able to communicate better with people and connect better with people and the environment, okay, which is the most important thing. So awakening, or aspects of awakening, and there are two things that that allow us to become mindful or awaken in a particular moment. We refer to these two events as conscious or unconscious shocks. Okay, so like in that explanation that I was saying, where the people weren't conscious of this new person that was there until something or someone or something within them brought them the awareness that they weren't in the reality. Okay, so there is a shock that happens, and so there is something that we call a conscious shock or an unconscious shock. Okay, for the most part, usually we tend to fall under this side, where we are usually asleep or unconscious, and then an external event calls our attention, calls our consciousness. Okay, so this is when a sudden and unexpected circumstances call our consciousness. Okay, so again, like I was saying last week, you're walking on the street, you're on your phone, you're not aware of the fact that you're not supposed to be crossing the street, and then a car stops right in front of you, and then in that moment, the external circumstance calls your consciousness. In that moment, you become conscious. In that moment, you really feel your emotions, you really feel your body, and you're there, you're present, right? And then 2 seconds later, you step out of it and you say, "What's wrong with you?" Then you yell at the person, whatever, right? Now you fall back into that state of sleep. So that's one part, and then the other one is what we call a conscious shock. Okay, and this is the ones that we try to develop in this practice. So in a conscious shock, it is the soul or the essence that attempts to awaken. Okay, so again, going back to what I said in the beginning, having this attitude 24/7 that you're not fully aware of everything, but there is much more to this than meets the eye. And so that brings you this attitude that, am I really awake in this moment? Am I really conscious? So you take a moment and you check yourself. Usually you breathe, you connect with self, and usually you connect with your physical body first. It's the easiest thing, right? You breathe, you begin to feel yourself within the body, sense yourself within the body, and then, where am I? And you begin to feel, see, pay attention to the environment. Okay? What am I thinking? How is my thinking affecting my perception of reality? Okay? And all of these things that happen. So in this is the most important. This is one of the most important tools in spiritual awakening, the conscious shock. Okay, but like I said before, it begins with this attitude, or with this idea that you are not fully conscious, and you need to develop, or you need to awaken your consciousness. Okay, and even when you awaken consciousness, there are degrees and degrees and degrees of consciousness. Like we said last time, there are different degrees of consciousness, and so the question is time. How long are you able to maintain that state of self-awareness, of consciousness, okay, in which you're observing your thoughts, you're feeling, you're sensing yourself within the body, within the environment, and then you lose that state and you come back to it, right? So at the end of the day, you ask yourself, how many times was I actually conscious during the day, right? So then the question of frequency comes into place. So how long am I able to maintain this state of being, and how many times during the day? Okay? And then amplitude and penetration, which is how conscious were you in that time frame, okay? Which has to do with the degree of consciousness that you had at the moment. Okay? And so the division of attention that we talked about, right? Just a little kind of like a diagram. I hope this helps you guys understand this with my cheesy drawings there. But basically, the division of the attention, the first state of the first and second state of consciousness is what we refer to as fascination or sleep. Okay, so this is you. You're not even there. You're just a point. All of your attention is directed outward. Okay, and you see the tree, right? And usually, Krishnamurti even said, when we see things, we're not seeing the thing in and of itself. We're seeing the concept that we have about that. You see a tree and you have concept. Tree, the tree is green, the tree does this, etc. Okay? And so the point is, this is your attention, it goes to the tree, and that's it. Okay? When we begin to divide the attention, you begin to self-observe. Okay? And so you begin to actually become aware of the impression of the tree coming back to you and how the tree triggers thoughts, emotions, and action within you. Okay, so you begin to, you start to become aware of, this is me, and I see this tree, and when I see this tree, I get this image in my head about, I don't know, maybe I love trees, maybe I like to climb trees, maybe I used to like to climb trees when I was a kid, right? All of these things. So you begin to divide your attention between you as the consciousness, the awareness, what you're observing, and the impact that that is having on your consciousness. Okay? That is self-observation. And then self-remembering is when you add that third factor, which is, the sun is the symbol of the spirit, right? When you remember you as a self, as a spirit within, who is aware now that I am seeing the tree and that the tree is generating a state of being within me. Okay? Is that a little clear? So there's like a third aspect there, right? When you're self-remembering, you're not only seeing the world, but you're also feeling, sensing the world, and even see how the world impacts you, how the world moves things within you, okay? And you identify yourself not with what the external circumstance is bringing up within you, but as self. So another example could be someone starts insulting you, right? And right away you begin to feel negative. And so in that moment, you begin to self-observe, you divide the attention between the feeling that you have, what the person said, the situation, and yourself. And you don't allow then you begin to tune into more of self instead of that external emotion that is not self. Okay? And so you connect with that sense of being, that sense of peace, of serenity, of peace, that is your natural self. And from this point, from this state of being, you can still feel and perceive this other inferior type of negative emotion that's present in your body. So in other words, you have this complete experience of being self, spirit, soul, and not the emotion or the thought that you're experiencing. So emotions, sensations, and thoughts are things that we experience, but we are not that. And so when you're in that state of self-remembering, you are being. Who can feel, who can think, who experiences thought, sensations, etc. But you are not that. Okay? And so, does that make any sense? Yeah. It takes, and this is why self-observation.
It'd be like listening to music as well. It's sort of like listening to music where you kind of lose yourself in the music. Sort of like you can appreciate the music, enjoy the music, but like just forget about all the thoughts about the music and just kind of be with the music or something.
Right.
Like it's similar to that. Maybe?
Yeah, when you're saying that, I'm picking up becoming. When you're self-remembering, you're becoming. more than just the external aspect. You like you said you're one with the music, kind of.
Well, sometimes when I listen to a really good music, like it's like something more is happening. I feel like it's more than just enjoying it. I feel like it's like I don't know, I'm becoming one with it or something.
Right, exactly.
It feels like I enjoy the whole thing, the whole experience.
Right.
Not just the sounds, not just the voices, just something more is happening.
Yeah.
Like with a tree, you can enjoy nature, but it's more than just appreciating a beautiful tree. It's like it's everything.
Right.
The whole thing.
Yeah. To connect, I guess, to connect with the life that is within everything, the life that connects you with the object, with the music, with the person, etc. Right? That essence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just maybe this will help. It's like for tree or music, it's like you resonate with that vibration in a way in that moment. It's not more of like, I mean, you could say being like connected to it, but it's more of being at that level of it, so you understand it. So sort of, it's like being connected towards it in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
This is what I say. This is why it's very interesting too.
And it's hard. It is hard to just totally disconnect from your thoughts, and
Yeah.
it is very hard.
Right.
Yeah, but at some point you do, and that's when you feel that being, that presence.
Right. Yeah.
Being in the moment.
Yeah. And yeah. And this is why again it's kind of hard to really express what that is.
It's
You
not
know.
the Tao.
But-
the moment you try to explain it, it's not the Tao.
Right. But this is why I also love to hear people's explanations about it. Like listening to Eckhart Tolle explaining how he perceives the present moment, how he feels, how, because it allows you to like, okay, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. And then you begin it begins to like help you actually go into it,
You can just point in the direction, but you can't. You have to find your way there.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Bottom, self-remembering, it makes me think of context and then being, and then it's like that middle, it's like that,
The triangle.
so it's like the source, the being, the context, and then it's like being, and then there's that middle, whatever it is, so it's not you, when you say it's not your feelings, it's just when you feel something, when you take away the reaction of the emotion, it's just being able to see it for what it is,
Right.
and then you're able to observe it. So it's like the attention, it doesn't become so subjective. It's more in the moment what it is.
Right.
And it kind of made me think when you were talking earlier about being present. It kind of makes me think when you're around people and you're having a conversation. And I was talking about it with someone on the train, and how when you're talking to someone, a lot of times people don't really see you. So you're talking, but once you're able to kind of operate from a higher density energy level, you're able to just see the person instead of seeing the external parts, and you're able to just perceive, and it makes you more aware, and you're actually in the moment and able to feel, and it's, what they're talking, and you're actually there with the person. And I noticed that my experiences with people is different. It's like a lot of times it's very like when people are talking to you, when you're talking, and they're not really seeing you. They're probably judging you on how you look, and then the message gets lost. But then when you're talking to the person and you're able to transcend just the physical part and just listen to them and hear them, it's like another level. And I noticed that kind of it reminds me of the divided attention and the self-remembering. And even in that moment, even though it's not about you, it's like you're able to experience something a lot deeper, and the moment is, you're able to be in that moment, the eternal now.
Right.
And I was watching videos of Toll, and
Yeah.
I like his story of how it's very practical, like, just about practical spirituality.
Yeah.
How he was just depressed and he just had that moment where he just kind of had like an awareness just awoke in him.
Yeah, it was a
And then it's
life-changing situation for him.
Yeah, and then after that, it's like he was changed.
Yeah.
And he was able to let go and just be non-attached.
Yeah, and I mean, in that moment, he, I mentioned this last week, he had suicidal thoughts. And in that moment, he realized, I'm not this emotion, I'm not this thought, I am something else that is, it's actually, it's like this
He was
peace.
having a conversation with himself, I guess, right? He's
Huh?
like, who am I talking to? If I'm having a conversation, who am I talking to? That's how it started.
Right, yeah. And so like you're saying, in that moment, when you're talking to someone else, you really begin to see now, I guess, how you really begin to connect more with the person that you're talking with, the environment, with life. You connect to, you begin to feel more than there is, right?
Well, there's so much more that people miss out on because they're not being present.
Exactly.
They are a way of thinking about tomorrow or whatever while they're having a conversation, and they're missing out on what's happening there
Right.
and then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very true.
Attention is so important. I want to talk about that. Just a comment after.
Yeah, oh no, I was going to say that it's actually, like, as time has passed and I keep learning, it's actually, it becomes a little easier, but it's still really hard because that ego side is always trying to catch you at the moment where you're not as aware. And if it does that, like, you'll automatically just, like, go back to sleep. And then something like a shock will come back and like, wow, I just missed what happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like right now, as I came in here and I'm sitting here throughout the entire lesson, like I've been present for a large majority, but then part of it's just like it just catches me off guard, and then I come back and I'm like, what just happened?
Exactly. Yeah.
But as you go on, the more that you are aware throughout the day, the easier it becomes to not be caught off guard, and it's just overall just practice. So that's what it is.
I want to bring up the point of attention, which relates to concentration. One of the phases of meditation. Before you enter into meditation, there's concentration. And so we need to train our mind to be able to focus and to concentrate on something, which is a very tough aspect in the culture that we live in, where everything is distraction. We're constantly distracted. There was a study about the study said that a goldfish has a longer attention span than most people now. Imagine that. A goldfish. It's like 8.5 seconds where we are like 8.2 seconds or something. Or 7.5 seconds, and a goldfish has an 8.5 attention span. So a goldfish is closer to self-realization than we are. A goldfish has more ability to know itself than we do in this moment because their attention is just, so we have to begin to develop attention. Like you said, the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. This is why the Buddhists say, don't worry about how many times your consciousness actually leaves you. The important thing is how many times you bring the consciousness back. Because the more that you bring it back and back and back, you begin to train the consciousness to be here. And it accumulates over time.
But how much conscious can anyone be or need to be? I mean, you can't always be fully conscious 24 hours a day. I mean, you do just have to switch off sometimes, right? Or
No.
no?
Well, we are unconscious because of the ego. Because we lose ourselves, really. Because we have been trained to live outside of self. We have been conditioned to live as ego and not as self. For instance, we have been conditioned to feel anxious when the train is late. And so in that moment, you step out of self. And they tell you it's a normal human behavior. It's normal to be angry, it's normal to be sad. And I disagree. I say, no, why? I can choose to be sad or angry, but I actually rather be peaceful and happy. And so as you eliminate ego, you eliminate those aspects of your psychology that tend to want to leave self. And this is why the ego is given this symbol of the devil, of Satan, or the dark, because it takes you away from the light, right? But it's all within yourself. It's that desire that arises within you to leave this blissful, peaceful state for anger, for feeling anxious, for sadness, etc. So we trade off the feeling of self for the feeling of the ego. So eventually, as you practice this, the more you practice this, the easier it is to maintain it longer. But in essence, at the core of it, you will truly only be awakened when you eliminate all of the ego. And it is possible. And this is why we're here. This is why spiritual masters say you need to awaken, you need to eliminate all of these things, and they teach about ethics and being. Right? Yeah.
I have something that happened on the train. It's always on the train.
Yeah.
There was a woman who was asking for money, and I used to always give away all my money. And at the end, I had no money, but I realized, like if they have less than me, and I don't know if they're lying or not, but I'm just gonna take their word for what it is, and because my intention is just to be helpful.
Right.
And I had some change, and it was when it was a little colder, and I had some change, and I gave it to the lady. But in my pocket, I had like I guess like tissue, the lint inside. So when I gave it to her, I guess some of the lint went into her hand, and then she's like, "I'll take the money," and then she took the lint and threw it at me. And for that moment, my ego, I was like, "How dare she?" But
Right.
then I kind of recentered myself back, and I thought, I'm just the person in front of her that she's projecting it to. It's not me. It's just
Right.
it's like a sense of desperation, hopelessness,
Right.
and I was able to kind of put myself into her shoes and wonder what she went through. And I just realized, just at that moment, if I let my ego get to me, I was like, "Ugh, I'm not gonna help anyone. They don't
Right.
deserve it."
Yeah.
And I was able to recenter myself and just see how it's all inclusive. Like everyone has that same kind of feeling of, feeling depressed or
Frustrated.
detached
Yeah.
from like whatever, from anger, desperation, whatever. And when you're able to kind of see, I think how you're able to kind of get away from ego is just to kind of see how everything is kind of interconnected, and then you're able to be like, okay, it's not all about me and
Right.
it's just everyone feels the same way. And
Yeah.
that's how I kind of recenter myself back and be as egoless as possible.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great experience, and it gets back to that. It's about like there's this force within us that wants to push us to indulge in that desire of, I just want to punch this person back. I just want to indulge in the anger. Or you can just let it go and just not take it personal and be like, okay, that happened,
It's
and
a
that's
choice.
it. And it's all right.
It's a choice. Everything is a choice.
Yeah. Which also means you shouldn't go and like let people punch you or
Yeah.
insult you or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's not to take things personal. It's
Yeah.
like, whatever, it is what it is, and that's it. And you move on.
Is the ego kind of like the sin in us? You know how the ego is.
The ego is what pushes you to sin.
But it's not like the same thing.
It's no. Sin is the action of doing it, and so the ego is Satan that's tempting you to do it or pushing you to do it.
Yeah, my opinion or my belief of the ego is basically the system that makes you react. Ego is like that mechanism that makes you react, because like emotions, like negative emotions, well, emotions aren't good. The word emotion means reaction for something, right? happiness, peace, joy, those aren't emotions, those are states of being that you will always be at. For example, if you're happy, if you're at peace, and then something happens or you see something and a thought arises, right, which causes you to think in a negative way, that thought then gets amplified, which creates a negative emotion.
Right.
So you now have negative thoughts that were really big and now caused you to feel a different way. So that mechanism of like causing you to react from thought, and then you start thinking more negative, they amplify, and now you get anger or sadness. That thing is the ego. Like that process is like the ego in a way.
Right.
If you-
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I think I read somewhere before the ego was in response to resistance to what is or something. I remember.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah, I
that's-
think Eckhart Tolle explains something like
Something
that.
like
Yeah,
that.
it's resistance to what is. Yeah,
It's a resistance to what is.
it's not accepting. You know, I don't deserve this. I deserve something more.
Right, so you have to create your own idea of what your life should be. maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you're
What you
making
want.
up reality that it's not. All right, cool. So let's do a short practice. Okay.